Our guest today, Christopher D., has been an advisory director for Argyle for the past couple of years. Before that, he was in-house for 25 years, the last 15 of which was at Crane Co. We're going to talk about LTIPs. I'm Brock Romanek, today on Zippy Point. So Chris, LTIPs, long-term incentive plans. I remember when I first heard the term LTIP, it's such a weird acronym, but it is what it is, and they've been around a long time, so it's the disclosure for them. But with proxy design, graphic design, I imagine things have been changing. What have you been seeing?
They have, yeah. Thanks very much, Brock. Yeah, LTIP. I've always thought that's a strange acronym too, and strictly speaking, it's a very broad category. It includes anything that's any compensation that's delayed for a year or more, and that's contingent on something that's measurable. In practice, it really boils down to three things: stock options, restricted stock and restricted stock units, and what they call performance shares, which are shares that you'll get in the future, and how many shares you get depends on some metric that's embedded in the plan. And the reasons for using one or another of those are complex, and they have a lot of variables. So I just want to talk about, having made the decisions that you've made about them, what's the best way to communicate them? And there are three categories of things that you may find you need to communicate. The structure, what does the compensation depend on? What metrics are you using, and why are you using those metrics? Alignment, which is how does it work? How is the compensation determined by the metrics that you're using? And the third category is risk. Do you want to emphasize the level of uncertainty that's a part of the plan? So the first of those things, structures. What does the compensation depend on? What metrics are you using, and why? The simplest kind of disclosure is just to spell out the metrics that you're using, and you'll be able to see an example from a very simple example from UPS, just the basic terms of the awards and the proportions in which they're granted. There it is, spelled out in words. Very nice. Often you'll see that as part of a larger chart that displays the whole compensation plan and the long-term plan in its context. That's what Western Digital does here. This is quite a common kind of graphic that you see. And it really packs in quite a lot of information. Over on the left, you see these two vertical bar graph sort of things showing how much of the compensation is long-term and short, how much is at risk, and how much is fixed, and what's the balance of the four categories. That's those four ring graphs that you're seeing. Brandy Steege is Western Digital's been an esteemed client of ours for quite a while, and Brandy Steege and Kevin Lynn are the professionals we work with there. It often happens that you want to emphasize the timeline, and that the long-term compensation is really long-term, maybe 3 years. And a typical way to do that is with a sort of a timeline graphic, which Splunk does. Another of our clients. And I like this very much. It's simple, and it really emphasizes that, some of it you're getting now, some of it you're not getting for quite a while. And that's an important aspect of the plan. Another Argyle client is Cognizant, where Matt Friedrich is the corporate secretary. And I'm really fond of Cognizant's graphic style that we've developed together with them. I think it really tells you something about the company. It's very precise. I always think it looks like engineers put it together. Packs a lot of data into a small space, but it's attractive as well, and kind of fun and creative, which certainly describes that company as well. And you see again this timeline aspect. So those are some different ways of displaying the structure of the program. What are the metrics determine? Sometimes you also want to explain why those metrics, what's their relationship to the strategy. Sometimes the significance of a metric is obvious, like total shareholder return or total return relative to some index. Sometimes it's not completely obvious, like adjusted operating margin or sales growth, right? Why should a shareholder care about the sales growth when really, if I'm a shareholder, there's only one number that at the end of the day I care about. So why do I, as a shareholder, why do I want managers to have a financial stake in this particular measurement? One good, although fairly extreme example of that is Thermo Fisher, Sharon Briansky and her team. Their plan has got 11 different metrics. I have to scroll a little to get them all on the same page. And they're at great pains to explain, here are all the metrics, and here's exactly why they matter. You see right there why it matters. So if you've put together an LTIP plan that's as complex as that one is, shareholders are kind of entitled to an explanation of why does this need to be this complicated? And Thermo Fisher does a great job of explaining that. Having said what the metrics are and why they're important, you also want to emphasize that the compensation is determined by whatever the metric is, which is what I'm calling alignment. Going again from sort of the simple to the complex. Performance Food Group. Amy Bruck is the corporate secretary there, and we work with her. This is kind of the simplest possible way to do that, right? Just a couple of tables, because there are two different metrics. Here's a threshold, here's the target, here's the maximum, and here's how it turned out in 4 rows. There you go, couldn't be simpler. Performance Food Group, which is a leading company in the food services distribution business. Their disclosure is very short and sweet. I like to point people toward it often when they think, well, gee, does my proxy have to be this long? It's a good thing to show them a proxy that's very thorough, displays the company in a really good light, gets all the information across that needs to be gotten across, but is brief. A lot of people like that. Here's another slightly more elaborate example, but the same concept, right? Here's the maximum, here's the target, here's what here's the percentage of the target, and here's the corresponding payout. This says, and they almost always say, well, and then in between these, this looks like bands, right? But it's not bands, because there will always be a sentence that says, well, we do linear interpolation between these different bands. It's not just a step function, it's a continuous one. So speaking of linear, a lot of people will try to get it across like this. This is from Target, and I like this. It's very clean. Again, this is getting a lot of data into a small space and really painting a picture of what it is that you're, what it is that the program does. You can also use this kind of style when there's more than one metric involved, like Raytheon does. I like this page very much. I think this, for my money, it's the best reason to use a graphic, right? It's not just decorative. It's showing, it's illustrating what you want to get across, which is, when we do better, they do better. Or when we do better, you do better. It shows it in pictures, shows the linkage between what you're trying to measure and how things turn out for the executives. You can also elaborate that a little bit the way that UPS does, where not only have they got 3 different metrics and they're showing the relationship for each metric between the achievement and the payout, they're also showing the way it actually turned out in the past year. That's those green vertical lines in the top 2 graphs. And then that sad little red line in the bottom left graph there, which shows that they didn't make the minimum performance, so there wasn't any payout on that portion. And I like being able to not only get across I like being able to get across not just the correspondence, but also the way that the plan actually turned out. There's a slightly more elaborate version of that is what Crane Co. did a couple of years ago. This is close to my heart. If you look at this, this is the same sort of a graph showing the relationship between the metric, which is relative total shareholder return, relative to an index of capital goods manufacturers like Crane. It's also got those three little points on the graph which show how it turned out for the last 3 years. So this not only shows the results, it gives you some historical context as well. So I like this very much. It gets a lot of information across.
Were you working at Crane when that got put together?
I was. This is from, come to think of it, this page is from the year after I retired from Crane. But it was while I was working on the Proxy at Crane that we originated this graph together with Argyle, and I'm very happy with it. I think it gets a lot across. It's clean looking. It's got it gets across the no nonsense ethic. That's a big part of what Crane Co. is about. And at the same time is getting across lots of information, historical and structural. So that's two things to think about: the structure and the metrics, and the alignment between the metrics and the pay. And then the last thing is to think about whether it's advisable to show that the targets are stretch targets. If you go setting targets every year and you beat them over and over again, there's the possibility that shareholders are going to get suspicious about that. So you may want to show that management wins some, but they also lose some. This is a subtlety that it's important to talk about with your investor relations people, because they're the ones who can really judge what stockholders are thinking about your executive comp. They're the ones who, if there are complaints or for that matter compliments, investor relations are the ones who will hear them. So you can do that in a fairly simple way like this. This is from IBM, and over in the top right there, you see it says long-term. I hope you can see it says long-term performance share unit payouts as a percentage of target, and you can see that in the last 5 iterations, 4 times it's been below target. So that's them illustrating that these are real, genuine stretch goals. They don't always make them. Probably more common is to see a set of bar graphs like this. A lot of companies are using this this style now, and that's showing, as you see across the top. Just look at that first bar, total company. You know, there's the threshold, there's the target over there where it says 100%, and there's the maximum, and that yellow number in the bubble, that's the actual. So that shows also, as it happens, that last year Walmart missed all 3 of those targets, although not by very much. And one more elaborate iteration of that is again from Cognizant, which we remember has got they tend a little toward the Baroque sometimes, but I think this graphic is terrific. It gets a huge amount of information across in a way that's very very clearly illustrated. And so Cognizant is another company that I like to point people towards. So in the end, what it comes down to is, what do you want to emphasize? There's not one best, obviously, there's not one best way to disclose an LTIP and its structure and its operation. You can look at what's important about the plan. You should look at what's important about the plan. Why do you think that the plan motivates management in the direction of your strategic goals? It's important to make the structure clear, and is it important to explain the metrics? Do the metrics that you're using need to be explained if they're not completely obvious? Does the linkage need to be explained? And do you need to show that management has got significant skin in the game? And each of those things can be emphasized and graphically, and that's the business that Argyle is in. We work advisory directors such as myself who've all been in-house lawyers, although we don't give legal advice, and we all have experience in that, and we are also working with a fantastic team of graphic designers so that we can bring all these things to fruition, not just in somebody else's style. That's one of the real values of what we can do at Argyle, is that any financial printer, you can bring them a graph from General Motors and say, here, can you copy this? And they can copy that. What Argyle can do is make sure that it reflects your company and that it's consistent with your trade dress and your branding guidelines. One of the first things we do in the first meeting is ask for a copy of the branding guidelines. And our graphic designers are very, very skilled at putting together graphics like this in a way that will be seamless with, not just with the rest of your proxy, but with all the rest of your disclosure and your trade dress. And
it seems like LTIPs is an area where your branding, each LTIP plan is so unique to the company, and you could tell by it was so comprehensive. That was a great presentation, Chris. But by all the different examples that you can pull from proxies, that the graphic, the design at best matches the type of plan that you have and the results of that plan.
Exactly. As I say, the graphics, you shouldn't ever think of the graphics as being decorative, even though their appearance is so important. You should think of them as communicating the thing that you want to communicate. So sometimes it takes a little sitting back and thinking, well, what's that? What's important about this plan? If I were a stockholder, what would I be curious about when I look at a plan like this? Which are the parts that I need to have explained to me, and which are the parts that show the plan in the best light from the point of view of a shareholder who at the end of the day has only got one number that he or she cares about.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Brock. This has been great.